All right, I'm bringing to you today AJ Harper, who wrote Write a Must Read, a book that I recommend all the time. Literally, I was on the phone with her last week, and while we were on the phone, someone sent me a text saying that they just bought the book because I'd been on a webinar that day talking about it. And so AJ is one of my favorite people. Started working with her when I wrote a one-man show. She was the screenwriter, brilliant, got things done so efficiently. Like just the whole design of it was just fantastic. And so I ended up working with her on two other projects, but the second project is where I found my voice, like where I really got to the place where I could just write. I used to kind of like somewhat write, then have other people pick up the work that I was insecure of doing or didn't quite know what my voice was. And so it was pretty phenomenal. And I think that there's a lot of people out there that want to write a book, but maybe afraid to write one. I know when I wrote Killing Sacred Cows, I was really intimidated by writing because it's like, do I know how to do this well enough to put it out there? I know I have good information, but how about articulating that information? And so AJ's got like the definitive book on what you could do to make something like that happen. And I've referred many people to her workshop that she does. Do you only do that once a year? How often do you do that workshop?
Only once a year for 15 people, so
Yeah.
yeah.
And
It's a
so
it's a bit of a gauntlet, you know? It's for me and the authors, but it's worth it.
how does it work? Like, talk about that for a minute.
I designed it so that I could teach people how to write it, but also be their editor in the process. So that's why it's so hardcore for both me and the authors. We meet live on Zoom, this small group, twice a week, and then I do a private one-on-one with each author every week. And the first 5 weeks are about developing the book, which most people rush through that. And that's part of why it's hard to write a good first draft or even really honestly any first draft.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of manuscripts become teardowns. And it's why people like you find that you might want to find someone else to help you doctor it or whatever. And you kind of miss out on your chance to do it yourself and find your voice in the process. So we focus on developing the book with who you're writing it for, what's your transformational core message, what's the promise of the book, and then a transformational outline, which is very different than the way most people outline. Most people outline by just organizing stuff. I I liken it to a silverware drawer. Like they just put all the spoons with spoons and knives with knives and forks with forks. And we were working on Money Unmasked. That was a lot of our conversation was what makes sense for the reader, not what seems to go together. And that's
Right.
the
Before talking to you, I've been writing that book for years. And one of the things I was missing, like I feel like there's like a process that I use, which is first find a co-creator. And so if you have an amazing editor or if you're in your workshop and you're going through that, you don't have someone to co-create with because sometimes just I would call you because I had an exciting day of writing and I wanted to talk about what the concepts were. Or but then you were like, hey, we don't do we is this essential? And how do we take this from 80 some thousand words to 40,000 words so more people read it? But then it was like in any book writing process, I think people need to eliminate things. And a lot of it's they just have to eliminate their escapisms because there's so many excuses for not writing the book and the things that they need to do first and all the stuff that isn't real that they use their time for as a busyness because it's like okay, putting something out there, it's pretty vulnerable to put a book out there into the world. And then it's about delegation as you build momentum, so that you have the time to really focus and make something great. And then finally the collaboration, because it's not just one editor, it's the copy editor, it's the proofreader, it's the designer, it's and then there's distribution. There's a lot to it. And when I wrote my first book, there's just more than you could know, even if someone told you all they knew until you go through the process. But when I all of a sudden was like, oh, I'm now a publisher, AJ, and I got this distribution, I got this distributor, I was calling you constantly because of all the things that I didn't even understand after writing multiple books. And you just kind of like, oh, yeah, well, this is what you do here, and here's who you talk to there. And so just having that right, those resources and someone that knows that, it could just save so much time. But the other thing I want to talk about is the thing that annoys me most about books is when people say my book is my business card. I'm like, nobody wants a business card. Nobody
no,
like
because
what
they put it in the trash.
right. Like I hate if someone goes, what do I do with a business card? Someone gave me one yesterday. I was like, I don't even know what to do with this,
It's just garbage.
Yeah, I don't and And so to treat a book where if someone really has a message they want to share, and to do that in a way that's really effective for the reader, because when I wrote my very first version of my first book, it was a lot about like me trying to prove something and to sound smart, not necessarily about the reader. And so you're right, a must read really like flips that and has a process of how do you make this about the reader so that they actually enjoy it and create word of mouth and all those kind of things.
It's funny, people still talk about a better business card. I was teaching a class the other day, and someone said to me with just total sincerity, as if it was brand new information, I think of a book as a business card. And it was everything I could do not to laugh because I want to be respectful. But I wanted to say, dude, I've been in this business 20 years and people have been saying this for 20 years. This is not effective because here's the thing. It's just really simple. You said word of mouth. It goes like this. You love a book, you tell people about it, you buy it for people, you recommend it to people. Like I always talk about The War of Art by Steve Pressfield.
Love that book. Listen to
I
it every year.
personally have sold thousands of copies of that book. I personally have sold thousands of copies. It's in that book. He endorsed my book. That was amazing. But
Yep.
I also wrote about him in the book. I talk about him in every class. I Why? Because it changed the way I looked at writer's block, which I now know thanks to him. I mean, I learned this 20, almost, over 20 years ago, I read his book, and it changed my life because I no longer felt blocked because I understood it. When a book does that for you, even on a smaller scale, even if it's not like change your whole life, but just part of it, shift a perspective, you're going to say, oh, I read the coolest book the other day. You know what you got to read? You got to read Money Unmasked. You know what you got to read? You got to read Killing Sacred Cows. Do you know what I mean? That's why it keeps going. And then it reaches a tipping point where people are just automatically recommending it, even if they aren't sure why. That's where you get like what happened with Mike McAllowitz, I wrote all his books with him.
Yeah, like
That's what
profit
happened.
first. Yeah.
That's what happened with Profit First. Now people will say, "Oh, Mike, I loved your book," or when they find out that I wrote it with him, "Oh my gosh, I love Profit First." And, oh, what did you love about it? Well, I only got to the first chapter, right? When a book reaches that tipping point, it's a phenomenon then, and it's just like churning constantly, you know? But you first have to write something people want to talk about.
Yeah. And when I wrote the self-published version of Killing Sacred Cows, then I got a literary agent after that, and we got it to a publisher, and we rewrote the whole book. And he was like, only written to like one type of reader, which is like the analytical. He's like, there's no, you're missing these other pieces. So we went through and we're like, what is the big idea? What's the nuts and bolts to this? What are the entertainment stories or, connective, like that isn't just data? And then how can you leave people with hope? Because I was kind of you think Killing Sacred Cows was a little intense for this, 20 some year old writing a book. It's like, I want to get this passionate message out there, but it wasn't coming across as passionate. It was coming across as angry sometimes. And
Mm.
so when I had that perspective, that book's still on the list. I wrote it in, 2018, the version that got published, or not 2008, the version that got published, and it's still, in the top 100 on a couple categories in Amazon. But that's the word of mouth. That's the write a must read. So like
Mhm.
in Money Unmasked, you had me create a reader group, and we got feedback,
Yes.
and the feedback on one of the chapters that I wasn't sure whether they're going to keep was the most popular chapter. And we ended
Yes.
up, yeah, we moved it up just a little bit where it still made sense in the book with a cycle of creation. And so, like, we got that actual feedback, and it wasn't just people I knew; it was people that I didn't know. And that's again, you have to be a little bit vulnerable to put it out there, but don't take it as criticism. Take it as like you have co-creators that are saying, "I want this book to do well because I'm now involved in the process, and this is how it's coming across."
I always say feedback is just information. You can decide if you want to use that information or not. That's why you need I mean, we're getting ahead of ourselves, but that feedback protocol is what I call it. I've developed it over the years to be a certain way, um, to get this information that I wanted, but you also have to get the right people and the right number of people. And then what you can do is look for patterns. So you decide, do I want to keep this information or is this person an outlier and I'm not going to pay attention to what they're saying? But it did really change the book in the ways it needed to. But I think that you just said that you had to rewrite once you went to the publisher. that's why you have to take time to develop a book, because otherwise it almost always becomes a lot of wasted time. And in that workshop we were just talking about, that's why I do the first 5 weeks, a focus on development, but also a kind of a crash course on publishing, because most people don't realize they're getting a lot of bad information. So I try to just give, with kindness, the straight scoop on all the different paths and help people start making a decision. And then for 4 weeks, we pause and everybody writes like the wind for 4 solid weeks, to get as much content as possible. And finally, the most time-consuming part of the class, everybody's turning in chapters to me for the last 5 weeks, and we're cranking it out, and I'm editing their work while they learn how to edit. So it's a lot. I always tell people, be be gentle with yourself if it's your first book, because you're learning how to do it while you're doing it, which is
Right.
nuts. It'd be like if you were building a house, but you didn't know how to build a house. You had to learn how to build it while you built it. It's just, it's a lot.
Yet, like, it's worth the work because I feel like it's, I'm in the world of finance, and a lot of people talk about, oh, investing in real estate or investing in stocks and bonds. But I think one of the best investments is intellectual property because it actually builds relationships. Like when I used to do real estate, I never met any of my tenants. I just talked to attorneys and bankers, and I talked to property managers and I talked to maintenance people. And nobody ever really thanked me or cared, and it was all super boring. When I wrote Killing Sacred Cows, I started meeting all these amazing people because they engaged in the work. It accelerated the relationship, and we had more profound conversations. They felt like they knew me, and I think that if people really think of the way that some people are promoting books these days is use AI. Like AI to make things a little bit more efficient is okay. But like these, I've seen people like, oh, get a book done in 30 days. I'm like, this is the best of who you are that you want to put out in the world. And what my argument is, if you don't put in the work, you won't actually put in the work to get it in people's hands. If AI did the work for you, you're not really going to care about the work. You're not going to feel like, you know, I don't know. It's like you don't feel the sense of accomplishment. You don't learn who you are through the cathartic process of writing, and you don't actually deepen a lot of your principles and ideas and philosophies when you go through that writing process. I mean, and so if you skip that, I just think it costs you in a big way.
I want to just say that yes, because first of all, a book is not transactional. That's what you believe. That could be your life's work. For many of my students, it's um, years and years of codifying their intellectual property, of figuring out what works. But I think you're a perfect example. You had a lot of different types of collaborators, but when so we had, our process took longer because I had a lot of personal stuff happen. And then also it was the pandemic. It was just weird. All this weird stuff was happening. But because of that, I feel like you were given the time to figure out who you are as a writer. And you're not the same now. You can go create your projects, and you have so much confidence in your voice and what you want to say and your own vision, that's priceless, even beyond the books themselves. Because that means as you go forward, you take that with you into every single project.
When that's like people, if they just understand, like, and ask the question, what's that worth? Because, okay, the first time I got up to speak, I wasn't a good speaker. The first time I had a speaking coach come and film me speak, I was so nervous and so monotone. It was terrible. To the place where now I could do, a comedy special on Amazon, or, the theatrical keynote that we worked on together, or just get up at any time, at any moment. But that's because I just did the work. And the same thing happened with writing. Is when I got someone like you to coach me, it helped me to understand my process and also the process, and merge those two. So it was my unique voice, but there were ways to pull that out that you understood. And, I know that you do like one-on-ones where people can work with you for like a day and a half at your writing
Mhm.
retreat, or they could go through the 15-week course, and, or 15 people. I don't know how many weeks it is, but,
14, you were really
yeah,
close.
really
You were
close.
really
So,
close.
but, but it's like, anything that you really want to do that you don't know exactly how to do just requires having really good advice and putting in the reps. And like
Yes.
last night, I was kind of tired on my flight home, but I still wrote for an hour, and I still got 1,000 words out. Well, I wasn't even that like I used to take me 6 hours to write a blog. I get them done in an hour and a half to 2 hours, and they're at the same quality, if not better, sometimes. And most of them are like 2,500 words. But it's just because I learned my process. I learned how to write. I got the confidence because I've gone to courses. I've worked with you. I'm, reading books on it, like all that kind of stuff. I've talked to other writers about how they go about writing and going, oh, I like that idea. I started to learn that all these people that have written amazing books, they consider their first draft sloppy. They just,
Oh, first
it's
drafts are terrible.
right. And it's like, but just without knowing that, people will be stuck. And I just want them to understand the gift of if they actually put something like that out there in the world, what comes back to them in the form of relationships, in the form of like feeling impact, in the form of like holding a book in my hands for the first time, even though it was the self published version. It was in April of 2007 in front of a room. They handed me my book and I read the intro. It was like such a magical moment, an exciting moment. And it was like changed the trajectory of my life. Just the people that I've met, the conversations I've had, and the type of work that you do. We were talking like Money Unmasked. I did this big book tour to sell the books, and I sold like 8,700 books by just doing a speaking tour. And then the Wall Street Journal decided that month I was finishing the speaking tour in November of 2003 that they weren't going to do the list
Oh,
anymore.
they could cancel the list.
I'm like, I have 3 speeches left, and I'm about to go on stage for one of the speeches. And someone walked up to me like, "Did you hear about the Wall Street Journal?" I was like, "No, what?" They're like, "They just canceled their relationship with BookScan, and there's no longer a list." I'm like, "Wait, I'm about to hit the list in about a week from all the
Yep.
book sales." So what I did was because I had a co-publisher, I just sent them myself because I could send them through my own distribution, not through the bookstores.
So
So
BookScan is owned by Nielsen, and for anybody watching, and they record the sales, and they get about 85% of print sales. Usually there's a bunch of outliers, and that's because not every bookstore has to, it's voluntary if you want to report. Um, but anyway, yeah, so if you do a bunch of back of the room sales and they aren't recorded by BookScan, then it doesn't go toward the list. So you might as well, if you're not trying to get on WSJ because it no longer exists, then you can do whatever you want, I guess. Unless you're trying to go for the Times, but
that's pretty.
that's
That's a
that's a
tough one.
curated
Yeah.
list. There's also USA Today, which is actually not that hard. If you can sell 8,700 books, you can
Yeah.
work toward
So
getting on that list.
so I end up sending them out myself, and then don't really do my full promotion of Money Unmasked. Although I have one in store later this year. But I was telling you how it started hitting the Amazon list, the top 100, and
Yes.
that's because of the work that I did with you. Because we created a book that creates word of mouth. It's
Hmm.
my highest rated book. It's 4.7 stars.
I
Um,
didn't know that.
yeah. So
I
I
love
mean,
that.
Rockefeller's has like 2,500 reviews. So, and it's a book about insurance with 4.6. I'm pretty surprised that it's at 4.6, to be honest. But here's another thing that happened working with you is, so I wrote What Would the Rockefellers Do, thinking it was like my least popular. Like I didn't really think it was going to do much. Like I had a small initial strategy with it, but all these financial people started buying it in like 100 copies at a time, 200 copies at a time. So it started just, I remember one day, I just looked it up a few years ago and it was number one in wealth management. Number one. I was like, what? And it was in the top 200 books that day on Amazon. Now,
That's
yeah,
very
someone must have placed a big order or something. I don't know what happened exactly, but I was like, wait. So I started reading the reviews, which reading the reviews is a pretty cool process. Like there's so many people that say the nicest things, and I love reading them. And the few that don't say nice things, it's fine. Like but
whatever. It doesn't matter.
you gave me this confidence, and I was like, wait, this book is so popular. It's selling hundreds of thousands of copies. I'm going to rewrite it with the writer I am after AJ. So I was like, because I wrote it pre AJ. So I was like, I'm going to rewrite it. And I actually just pulled out a Word document that was blank and didn't insert the book into the Word document or work from the Word document.
Yes.
I just rewrote it. And I just got a note this week that said, "Oh my God, I bought this book for someone else because I'd already read it, but this is an entirely different book. It's so good." So it's like it's cool that you know because it was AJ and Taylor Swift that inspired me. She was redoing her albums, and I was like, what's this about?" And then someone told me, I'm like, I'm going to do that with Killing Sacred Cows. So I rewrote Killing Sacred Cows, and thanks to you, I cut out 30,000 words. It was that book was fluffy because my publisher said we want more chat, we want a thicker spine for Barnes and
Oh
Noble.
gosh.
And so I allowed myself to water that book down. And it's so funny because the negative reviews on that are always like, yeah, I said the same things over and over sometimes, or yeah, this could have been said in fewer words. And I was like, damn it, they're right. So I added the entire investor DNA concept and shortened it because of how you helped me understand the writing process, because of how you helped me find confidence in my voice, because you taught me a way to go about doing this and to make it about the reader. And then I just, anyone that's ever going to write a book, it's the first recommendation. I'm like, you got to write, you got to write a must read, because a lot of people, again, they're being given bad advice. Oh, just
Oh,
get it out, just get the book out there. No, no, no. Like, I look at it like an artist. Like, I have vinyl, I have a record player here in my cabin. Like, that enters the home. A book enters the home. People display it on their shelf. You see it on Zoom meetings, just like right here. You can see AJ's books there and other books on her shelf. So the thing is, give the best that you've got. But the way to get to your best is the same way every professional athlete gets to their best. They have coaches. They have people that support them to get the best results, that give them outside perspective so they know what to do. And I'm telling you, AJ's the best in the world at that. So if you have an opportunity, whether it's to read her book or whether it's to have her for a day and a half, the bottom line is it's a before and after type of experience. And if you're going about things without it, you're just not putting out your very best work because you don't quite know what you're capable of.
wow, thank you for saying that. When I love to see you just out there doing your thing with so much confidence, it lights me up inside. And I also have students who come to me, quite a few actually, who have, a lot of stress around writing. Maybe they were in remedial English, some were in special ed for English or reading, and they have a strong message and they really want, and they're successful in their lives. I mean, I have worked with a ton of super successful people, but writing a book is confronting, almost like nothing else. All of a sudden, all your success sort of melts away and you just feel so nervous about it. But what I love is that they are different. They're better writers, even if they didn't want to become better writers, even if the whole goal was just to write a great book, they do come out the other side like, wait a minute, I have this skill now, and that's forever. I mean, the book is transactional, but it's that skill set you have, the confidence you have, the knowledge you have, you can take forward into anything. And that's what makes me so happy, is to see people who thought they weren't good writers who have total confidence as writers.
Yeah, like it's such a worthwhile skill. I think there's exponential skills in the world. I think communication, whether it's on stage or whether it's on a computer typing something, like it moves, it inspires, it connects. And in a world where there's so much noise and busyness, books still slow the world down because someone will read it while they're in bed. They'll read it while they're, on a like we were just in Hawaii and there's all these people just laying around the pool reading a book, a physical
Mm-hmm.
copy of a book, right? There's something about it. Like even if like I bought War of Art on audiobook and then immediately bought the physical copy. I listened to the Creative Act on audiobook, immediately bought the physical copy, display it because they're just books
Yeah.
that impacted my life. And then I love to tell people about these books, like write a must read. So like that's what's possible. But the other thing that's possible is what it exponentially can do to someone's brand and business,
Oh, it's
because
amazing.
yeah, I had 6,000 people in my database when I wrote Killing Sacred Cows. And all of a sudden, I'm being introduced to the people that I'm listening to on audiobooks because someone loved my book and sent it to that person. And then I got on calls with them. Or, all of a sudden I had speaking gigs in all over the place versus just locally. Like it just brought me, into a whole different world. And what's interesting is the people that buy my books are financial people. The one because I'm, like they love giving my book out, and I end up doing a lot of work for them. I just talked to someone that made $26 million by sending my book to one person. I talked to another person who made $10 million because these were legacy stuff with Rockefellers. I was like, that's pretty amazing. And I'll just have people send pictures. Yeah.
That ripple effect of change.
Right. So if you,
Beyond the change that's happening to you personally, you get all these opportunities, business, more money, more relationships, different kinds of relationships. You're invited to a seat at the table where you would never be invited. But I think the coolest thing is that ripple effect where people message you and say, I just got a $26 million deal because of your book. Or I've got students that I had one who called me on a Sunday, and I'm not, if you called me on a Sunday, I would be like, what's up, Garrett? But if most people, Sunday, no, right? But it was so odd that I thought, oh, maybe it's an emergency. So I answered the phone and she was crying and she said, my book's only been out a week and I just received a letter from someone who said I saved their life. And I hear this a lot. People use that term. They say it all the time. They don't really mean it. But the person had literally decided not to end their life after reading her book. And I was like, what? What if you didn't write it? What if you didn't write it?
yeah.
And small change, big change, it's hearing from the readers and it has that ripple effect. And believe me, if people are texting you and writing you and messaging you, that means they're telling people. And again, that's how the book becomes a phenomenon.
Yeah. There's people that know my book but don't know who I am, and and there's people that'll send like someone that's talking about the book on a podcast or at a conference and things like that. So it's just like it's pretty cool that you can make, and it's so much leverage because people are engaging with you when you're not around. Like I always think of it as like, what if like I was talking about how I delayed flight last night, so we delayed a little bit, get the start time for this while I was waking up. But my book's always my best foot forward, even if I'm not on my best day. If someone gets
Oh,
it,
that's
it's like,
good.
yeah.
Your book is your best foot forward. It is. It also simplifies. I only wrote, right? I didn't actually intend to write a Must Read. I was a ghostwriter for 10 years, prescriptive nonfiction, lots of famous thought leaders, who I can't name. And then started teaching because I really I had developed the methodology. So I think the reason that uh that book, Write a Must Read, works and my class works is because I had to create a system for myself because I started ghostwriting with the first book contract I got. I had never written a book before. What the heck? I was a playwright before that. I just was determined. I had a brand new baby and we were living in Brooklyn in a fourth floor walk up. It was freezing cold, was terrible. And I just thought I could go get a stupid like executive assistant. We always have these dumb jobs as writers that are not related to writing. And I would always get a office job. You know why? Because then I could stay late and use the computer and the printer to print my stuff out and I could afford to do it. And I had this little baby and I thought, I don't want to be away from this little baby. So I'm not going to go into this Manhattan and work 10 hours a day. So I said, I will write. I will earn my living from writing no matter what. And as long as the writing I do doesn't hurt anyone, like no bomb instructions or anything like that, I'm good. And I did. And I just wrote whatever until finally I got this. I had written little books like dumb stuff. And then someone hired me to write a um kind of a self-help book. And I was like, oh, all right, this is awesome. But how do I do that? I didn't know. And I was just like, I was in the I will figure it out phase of my life. Like, whatever, give me the job, I'll do the job. But it was in that process of asking questions that I didn't realize no one asked. Like, how do I make sure this works for the reader? She wants to promise this. How am I supposed to do that? So I would challenge myself. Okay, all right, how are we doing this? And I came up with a system for myself. And as it turned out, some of the questions I was asking, no one was asking because they were writing better business cards. So when I turn in the manuscript, they're like, holy shit, because I actually cared. I didn't know I wasn't supposed to. I didn't know that I could have just written all these better business cards. I thought we were supposed to deliver on the promise. Like, all right, I'm going to figure this out. And because of that, I figured out a way, a set of frameworks and questions you ask yourself, and a way of thinking that helps you go through this be much easier and thoughtfully. But the only reason I wrote that, because then I taught the class after I retired from ghostwriting, and I loved it, and it was so much fun, and it was working because my students just don't just publish. They have big five deals, they get huge awards, they get critical acclaim. They like these are not just these are people who have books, like you. And but I realized I was on vacation with my friends on Madeline Island, and one of my friends said, "Oh, how many students do you take?" And at the time I was teaching it twice a year, which I no longer do, but I said 30. And they said, "Oh, okay. Well, that's not that many people." And I thought, "Oh no. I'm being super elitist. Like I'm not really helping because I only this many people can learn it." So I said, "Oh, I'm gonna have to write it." And it was kind of like I was mad, 'cause I didn't really want to write it, but then I started doing it, and I'm glad I did because now I hear that's what I wanted. I wanted people to be able to just download the
Why didn't
audio
you want to
book.
write it?
I think I thought because I have written over 100 books and they don't have my name on them. And I really don't care. People always think I have like a secret jealousy, but I mean, I remember one time I was walking through Book Expo, which doesn't exist anymore. COVID killed it, but it was the largest book event in North America, and it was always at the Javits in Manhattan. And I was walking through there one day, just on the floor, expo floor, in between events or panel discussions. And one of my clients was winning an award, and I didn't even know the book I wrote was up for one. And I remember just laughing, and he didn't even tell me. And I remember just laughing, and I just kept walking, because I didn't feel attached to any of the books. But I thought, oh, that first book I write with my name on it, I don't know, it's going to be a novel. It's going to be,
Mm.
I don't know. I wanted something, I don't know. I had a fantasy about it, I guess. And this felt like more of writing, the same kind of stuff I write. But then I realized you better write that because you need people to be able to just get it for 25 bucks or check it out from the library for free or whatever so that they can learn. Otherwise, you're just making this system you learned and this framework you created exclusive to people who have money and or exclusive to just people who could get in on being the first 15 people for a class, which isn't right. That's not, my value system. That doesn't work for me. And thank goodness I did because I hear from people all the time who figured out what I love to hear is when people message me and say, I had been working on my book for 10 years and I cracked your book and now I got it. I got it. And that's worth it to me, to have written it.
That's awesome. And you also have a way that people can kind of get your content in a digital membership, right? How does that work? How do they
Yeah.
find that? How do
Uh,
they get into that?
Thank you for asking. Anybody can go to ajharper.com. Um, that's where I have, you can sign up for the workshop that's once a year. But I also created a membership because I only do this class once a year, but people are always needing stuff and wanting my advice, wanting my feedback on their core message, wanting to learn how to do things. And you remember I teach all these little master crafts. I'll get like a wild hair. I'm going to do 4 hours on chapter one, or I'm going to do 3 hours on pre-order campaigns. And I'll just decide to do it. So I made a membership where you could just get a, like kind of like an all access pass so that even if you're taking class in the fall, you have you can work on it. Or if you're not taking class in the fall, maybe that's out of your budget, you can do the membership. And
Mhm.
because you also need community. You just mentioned you can call me and text me and say, what the heck? Um, but not everyone can do that, obviously. But if you I do enough Q&As and accessibility that it makes it easier for people to say, is this the right thing? What this my publisher told me this. How do I deal with this issue? Because you need someone who's been around, who can guide you in those situations.
So what are those sticky notes behind you on the wall?
That's right, a must read.
That's like the layout of it.
Well, some of them have fallen down, but yeah, I like to outline. That's my outline for write a must read, and the different colors represent either teaching points or stories or research or how to, but a bunch has fallen down. And I told myself I'm not taking that down until I write the second book. Now, I write with Mike, so I've written many books since then, but they're not mine.
You're talking Mike McAllowitz.
Yeah, we have a new one out in January of next year. Um but I do have a second book I'm starting, which uh probably won't be out till 2027 because I'm taking my sweet time with it. So I'm about to take all that down, actually.
When the
I'm
book goes
still
up.
in the sort of, you know now what I mean when I say this. I'm in that sort of like, what is this little discovery phase? So I'm not ready to post it yet.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm gonna take all that down and put up a new one.
I I finished a manuscript a couple years ago. I think I had you read it, right? The using humor to teach finance.
Yes, I think I read it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's still sit. I need to do something with it. I haven't done anything with it yet because I need to find somebody to illustrate it.
Yes. But I mean, you're the kind of person who churns out stuff. I don't know, my lighting just went weird, but
Yeah.
you're the kind of person who churns out stuff all the time. Like once you figured out, stepped into your voice so solidly, you're just like a machine.
Yeah, I got COVID and my wife sent me to the cabin. And so I was up there by just me and my dog for like 7 days. And I had been tinkering with that book and I wrote so much of it over that 7 days. It's 20,000 words, but it's humor. So it's actually a little bit, it's like it takes a little bit more time because it's fewer words, but all the words kind of are leading towards laughter, hopefully. So, and I think saying less is the most important thing in humor. Like if you go too long, it's like, you know so it'll be interesting when that comes out, but yeah, it was helpful. But I think the reason I haven't come out with it is because I feel like Money on Mass deserves my full attention towards getting in people's hands before I do that next one. I still haven't done the full push for that yet.
That's a big mistake a lot of authors make. I'm glad your instincts are strong on that. A lot of people just churn stuff out and they don't devote themselves to it enough. You remember that you connected me with Hal Elrod,
Hmm.
and in the conversation I had with him, I was kind of picking his brain. I was trying to figure out what does he know about selling, because he self-published Miracle Morning and sold, I don't know, where's he at? I do know because Mike texted him when we were recording the podcast the other day. And I think he said it was almost 3 million copies, or was 2.5, something like that. Um, and I asked him, I said, well, what do you attribute, what are some of the th strategies you use to get those sales? And he kind of was telling me the same stuff, and he didn't really know me, but then he kind of realized that I knew that, knew about the industry and that I was going, uh-huh, that, yep. And I mean, I was being very polite and he's wonderful. He's such a gentleman. And then he got quiet and he said, AJ, it's just that I stuck with it for 10 years.
Yeah.
And it's like, yes. And that seems so hard for people to wrap their brain around, a 10-year commitment like that. But I call it the life of the book. Like you can't, people are short-sighted. It's not just better business card mentality. It's also, even when you put your heart into it, not devoting yourself to it after, say, the 6 months it's been out. You have to actually have a long-term plan. You don't have to drive hard with it every day, but you need to consider the life of the book because a book can catch fire,
Yeah,
and it might be
Rockefellers
in
did
year
that.
3 or 4.
Yeah, Rockefellers came out in 2016, and I don't know when it started really taking off, but like, I looked it up last night when I was sitting there waiting on for my flight, and in one of the categories, it's 4 of the top 10 books because it's the Kindle, it's the paperback, it's the hardcover, and it's the audiobook. So, so they all count separately. And in the other category, there was five because we just came out with an abridged version of it.
I
Basically,
mean, way to dominate.
yeah, we came out with an abridged version so that we just put some of the stuff that were like charts and numbers on a website so that we could shorten the book and actually sell it for less and get more copies out there just because of the popularity. So,
Yeah.
and yeah,
Yeah, but not that wouldn't work if people weren't getting value from it.
yeah. I mean, look, I've never asked for a review of that book. I've never said, "Hey, will you review this book?" And it has over 2,500 reviews. That just is the longevity of sticking with it. And then,
Yes.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
it's
too many authors, you'll go on these if you look on certain, people who book coach or programs, and they'll talk about all of their best-selling authors, and they're really Amazon best-selling authors, which is almost any of us could do. You and I could
yeah. You
write some.
could fabricate a campaign and hit it
You it
for a
takes
day.
it's easy. It's
Yeah.
it's really not hard. But then you go look. What I always tell authors to do is go look at those books that are on the site and go look them up on Amazon, and they're like tumbleweeds, right? Tumbleweeds rolling across the Amazon listing because nobody's looked at the book, nobody's reviewed the book in 2 years, and it's not selling. And those books are not making a difference in anyone's life, least of all the author.
Yeah, there's so many legs to books. Like just the speech I gave yesterday that I got paid a lot more than the other speakers I was talking to that were there without books. I wouldn't have been at the event without it. And plus, I gave books out to everybody as part of the speaking fee in the room. So, I ended up talking to people, signing the book, having a conversation. It was wild though that I said, "Who's read Rockefeller?" There's only about a sixth of the room raised their hand in finance. Because normally that would be like, the majority. I said, "Who'd read Sacred Cows?" Which I thought, well, I'm going to then give them the audiobook to Sacred Cows for free. And I had them, I told them to hit me up and I just give them a download because I just want those kind of people are going to buy a lot more books than just the one. And,
Yes.
but again, like if when I spoke to 20 billionaires, I gave them all Killing Sacred Cows. That's what happens when you write a must read. That's what happens when you do the work that AJ helps you with, and get you there is that you're just going to want to put it in people's hands if it's the best of who you are. If you gave it all that you could and then you had people chip away to make sure it's the most effective version, because it just takes collaboration to do something extraordinary. If you did it all in isolation, even the best authors would be rendered, less effective because they would get in a silo. They wouldn't understand. They might be too wordy. They might, talk about something that they understand, but that doesn't translate to the reader. They might use, they might have a chapter that doesn't belong. Like all those kind of things, you've got to have a co-creator. And if anyone feels stuck, but they've wanted to get a book out, like AJ's your person. Like, do a day and a half with her. I think you've got like three of those available. I'm not sure how many, but
I don't do it that often. It's the same process that I do with Mike when we are starting a new book. It's taking people through that developmental piece so you're really sure this is my book, this is who I'm writing for, this is my outline, this is exactly how I'm doing it. But also how am I going to, I mean, people don't think enough about how they're going to monetize the book if they're going to. Not everyone wants to do it, but you have to think about that while you're writing it. A lot of people make the mistake of figuring that out later. Um, and so it's thinking through all of those components so that you're ready to rock. Go do a book proposal if you want to go seek representation or a big five, or you could even take it and hand it to a ghostwriter if you're not going to write it. But I mean, or write it yourself. Then go write. But you got to have that clarity piece. You've got to have somebody who has deep knowledge in prescriptive nonfiction to be able to help you kind of cull it down to that kind of that transformational message that's going to make people really lean into what you have to say, and then how to craft each chapter in detailed ways so that people just keep turning that page.
yeah. So if you want to find your voice, if you want to write a book that's the best version of a book that you could do, make it a must read, create word of mouth. Like if I would have released my first Sacred Cows without the work that we did afterwards, it would have been a flash in the pan versus something that's, 15 years and writing an updated version and still selling out there. It's like it's worth it. And the number of relationships, the connections you make, the impact you can make, like it's one of those old school things that still work. Books are old, but they still enter the home. Just like vinyl's old, but it still enters the home. And again, it could be one of those things that cuts through the distraction because people still sit down with a good book. They still use it as something on a flight, something on a vacation, something before they go to bed. Like, it's, and look, readers make good clients.
Oh my gosh, that's the easiest sale you'll ever get. I had before we close, I had a person who wanted to come to workshop, and I always do a kind of a 20-minute call just to make sure they should go or not, because sometimes they don't have the right attitude for it or time, or I never want people to join who if they can't make the most of it. And I was telling her how it works and kind of, why I think it works. And she said, I'm I read your book. I just want to sign up. Like, can I sign up? Am I allowed to sign up? What do I need to tell you so you'll let me sign up? And that's what it can do.
Yeah. So look, if you're, at a minimum, you should grab AJ's book, Read, Write, and Must Read. If you don't have a ton of cash right now, you should join her membership and become a better writer because it's like a way writing a book's like a way to write checks. It's just a little bit of a delayed process. You write it, then the checks come in later. And then if you have something extraordinary you want to share, I would do the day and a half with AJ. I can't recommend it enough. And then, also if you want to be one of the 15 that gets in her, I know that I've sent people that have just loved that process. It was like challenging enough for them to write a book in the process. They said they would have never written a book without it because life got in the way. Things started to happen. And it was through that accountability, that support, that confidence, those skill sets. It's just, it's the key to have that perspective. I mean, it'd be like, you don't want to fly a plane if you don't know how to fly a plane. Bring someone that's a co-pilot that could teach you,
Yeah.
when you're writing
Yeah.
this book. I think it's pretty essential. So anything else you want people to know or tell them how to
Yeah.
reach you or
Well, sure. You can go to ajharper.com. And if you would like to, you can also just email me directly. It's super easy. It's aj@ajharper.com. But I think what I really want people to know is if you get that idea for the book and you feel this kind of, I really think I want to do that, you have the capability to do it. I don't want anyone to think that they can't. So just getting the idea is enough. Just getting the idea is enough. And you can learn everything else.
yeah. And even if you're multiple books in, you can still have an exponential leap in your capability if AJ's in your life. So I'll testify to that.
Thanks, Garrett.
Thanks, AJ. Appreciate you sharing all this.